Right now, there's a huge story happening across West Africa, and it's something that's been on the minds of many, especially here in Nigeria. The story that's making waves is about 11 Nigerian soldiers who were detained in Burkina Faso after their plane made an emergency landing in the country's airspace. This incident has been all over the news, and there's a lot of confusion and rumors swirling around, with some reports even suggesting that these soldiers could face life imprisonment. But we need to break it all down and get the real story so we can all understand what's going on. First things first, let's talk about what happened. On the 8th of December 2025, a Nigerian Air Force C-130 military cargo plane was flying through the skies when it encountered a technical issue. Now, anyone who knows anything about air travel understands how serious that can be. The crew knew that they had to land, so they made an emergency diversion to Bobo-Dioulasso, which is the second largest city in Burkina Faso. Now, Burkina Faso's military wasn't exactly happy about this landing. They quickly detained the 11 soldiers who were on board and seized the aircraft. Burkina Faso's government said that the plane had violated their airspace, and that's a big deal in any country, especially when it comes to military aircraft. You can imagine that tensions were high. According to their military, the plane did not have permission to enter their airspace, and that was seen as a violation of their sovereignty. But here's where things get interesting. On the Nigerian side, the military isn't agreeing with Burkina Faso's version of events. The Nigerian Air Force insists that the plane was simply following standard international procedures for an emergency landing. They say the plane wasn't making any unauthorized move. It just had a technical malfunction and had to land at the nearest airstrip, which happened to be in Burkina Faso. Now, I know this is a lot to take in, so if you're following along, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to stay updated as we keep track of how this story develops. So, there's this huge difference between the two countries' accounts of what happened. Burkina Faso is saying that it was an act of aggression, while Nigeria is saying it was a simple emergency. And here's the thing, both countries have their reasons for seeing it this way. Burkina Faso, for its part, has been dealing with a lot of political instability. It's been a part of the alliance of Sahel states, which includes Mali and Niger countries, that recently broke away from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Now, you have to understand that ECOWAS is led by Nigeria, and Nigeria is a key player in the region's peacekeeping operations. So, any conflict between Nigeria and these countries raises red flags. And let me just pause here. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, why would they detain Nigerian soldiers? Why would they make such a big deal out of something that seems like a technical issue? Well, the answer lies in the region's complex political dynamics. The Sahel region, where countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are located, has been experiencing a lot of political upheaval, and military interventions have been a part of the equation. Now, let's talk about the soldiers who were detained. These weren't just any soldiers. They were highly trained members of Nigeria's military, and their mission wasn't to cause trouble or get involved in any military action in Burkina Faso. But for Burkina Faso, their presence in their airspace, at a time when tensions were already high, was a serious concern. And this is where the speculation starts. Some people are wondering if the whole thing was actually more about regional power struggles than it was about the landing itself. But here's where the confusion gets even thicker. Some reports suggested that these soldiers could be facing life imprisonment if they are found guilty of violating Burkina Faso's airspace. That's a pretty heavy accusation to throw around. And if you're like me, you're probably thinking, life imprisonment for a landing caused by a technical issue. At this point, I have to tell you, don't jump to conclusions. The idea of life imprisonment hasn't been confirmed by anyone in an official capacity. In fact, recent updates have shown that the soldiers were released after a few days of negotiation. Yes, they were detained, but they weren't sentenced, and they weren't in prison for long. They were allowed to return to Nigeria, and while things are still a bit tense, it seems like they're going to be okay. But, we can't forget about the bigger picture. The fact that Burkina Faso detained Nigerian soldiers and made such a big deal about the violation of airspace shows just how fragile the relationships are in the region right now. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are all part of a military alliance that is separate from ECOWAS, and Nigeria, as a member of ECOWAS, plays a huge role in trying to stabilize the region. So when something like this happens, a military plane landing in an allied country's airspace, it's not just about the incident itself, but about the political message it sends. Now, Nigeria has been trying to be diplomatic about the situation. The Nigerian Air Force has made it clear that they are not going to escalate things. They don't want to make it into a political issue, But the fact that Burkina Faso detained the soldiers at all is still something to talk about because it raises questions about regional stability. It also makes you wonder, what's next for ECOWAS? What does this mean for the future of cooperation between the West African countries? If countries like Burkina Faso are moving away from ECOWAS and aligning themselves with other powers in the region, what does that mean for the security situation in places like Nigeria? And if we're talking about Nigeria's role in all of this, one thing is clear. Nigeria is sticking to its diplomatic approach. They're not trying to escalate the situation further, and they want to make sure that there's peaceful resolution. But there's no denying that tensions in the region are higher than they've ever been before. The military alliances are shifting, and Nigeria has to keep its eyes open. So, that's the gist of what's happening. The 11 Nigerian soldiers who were detained in Burkina Faso have been released, but the story doesn't end here. The region is still very much on edge, and the political stakes are high. For those of you who don't follow the political side of things, let me break it down for you. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, has been at the center of peacekeeping and military interventions in the region for years. Nigeria, as a leading member, has often taken on the role of a peacekeeper, stepping in to try to resolve conflicts between neighboring countries. But with countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger breaking away from ECOWAS, it's like the region is splitting into different factions. And when something like this happens, a military plane forced to land in a country that's already unhappy with ECOWAS, it adds fuel to the fire. Diplomatic channels are tested, and trust is strained. You have to ask yourself, how much longer can Nigeria keep playing the role of peacemaker if the countries they're trying to help are moving away from the very bloc they belong to? This situation is a perfect example of how political alliances can get messy. And I don't know about you, but it makes me think about the future of regional stability in Africa. If countries are choosing sides and breaking away from collective organizations like ECOWAS, what does that mean for countries like Nigeria, who are trying to maintain peace and stability? And just imagine what would happen if incidents like this continue to occur. What happens when one small misunderstanding or miscommunication turns into a full-blown crisis? The reality is, these kinds of events can snowball quickly. So, I really want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Nigeria should take a more aggressive stance? Or do you think they're doing the right thing by remaining calm and diplomatic? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video to keep the conversation going. Now, there's also the issue of public perception. From a Nigerian perspective, it's hard not to feel frustrated by how the whole situation played out. Many Nigerians have expressed anger online, saying that their soldiers were unjustly detained. I mean, who could blame them? If you think about it, these soldiers were on a routine mission, and now they're being treated as if they're in the wrong. It's frustrating for the people of Nigeria, especially when they believe their military is just doing its job. At the same time, we have to look at it from Burkina Faso's side as well. They have their own concerns about foreign military presence in their airspace, especially at a time when their country is dealing with so many internal challenges. They've been dealing with insurgencies, economic difficulties, and political instability. So, it's not surprising that they might take a very strict stance on military movements in their skies. But, as I mentioned earlier, this incident goes beyond just the Nigerian soldiers. It's about the bigger picture. Regional alliances are shifting, and military operations are becoming more complicated. If these tensions continue, there's no telling how they might affect the broader security situation across West Africa. We've already seen how quickly things can escalate in countries like Mali and Niger. And now, with Burkina Faso involved, the entire region is on edge. And let's not forget that Nigeria's role in the region is not just about military power. Nigeria has been at the center of efforts to address the humanitarian crisis caused by the insurgencies and civil wars happening in countries like Mali and Burkina Faso. So, when something like this happens, it makes you wonder how much longer Nigeria can carry that burden, especially when its own neighbors aren't as cooperative as they once were. So, again, I want to hear from you. How do you think this incident will affect Nigeria's role in the region? Is Nigeria still in a position of influence, or do you think the country's power is starting to wane with the rise of these alternative alliances? Now, let's talk about the legal side of things. While this incident might have started as an emergency landing, the fact that it became a legal issue with potential sentences hanging over the heads of the soldiers really brings to light the complex nature of international law in such situations. We're talking about sovereignty, airspace violations, and military protocols that are different for each country. What happens when something like this happens? What's the protocol for detaining foreign military personnel? How should the international community handle situations like this? It's not as simple as just saying, hey, the soldiers were in the wrong. There's a whole lot of legal framework that needs to be taken into account. And speaking of laws, you can't forget that Nigeria has a strong military tradition. We've been part of international peacekeeping efforts and have always worked hard to maintain peace and stability in the region. But what happens when the laws of one country clash with the actions of another? How do you resolve it without making things worse? These are the kinds of questions that leaders have to answer when international incidents like this occur. But again, we can't get too bogged down in the technicalities of it all. The bigger question remains, what does this mean for the relationship between Nigeria and Burkina Faso moving forward? The tension between the two countries has definitely been raised, and even though the soldiers were released, there's still a sense of unease in the air. As the situation continues to develop, there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered. Will these tensions lead to more diplomatic problems? Will there be any lasting consequences for Nigeria and Burkina Faso's relationship? And how will ECOWAS handle this situation moving forward? I know this is a lot to process, but I want to know what you all think. Drop your comments below and let me know how you feel about the situation. Do you think Nigeria is handling it well? Do you think Burkina Faso went too far? Let's talk about it. And once again, if you're enjoying this video and want to stay updated on more breaking news like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you never miss out on important stories like this one. Thank you all for sticking with me through this, and I'll keep you posted as soon as any more details come out. Stay tuned for updates.